I never imagined I'd be sharing this story, but here I am. My name is Rachel, and I was 26 when my entire world imploded. Back then, I had what most would consider a solid life setup: a management position at a promising tech startup, my own apartment in a decent part of town, and a boyfriend who seemed like he'd walked straight out of my dreams. Alex and I had been together for 8 months, but it felt like we'd known each other forever. He was everything I thought I wanted: successful, charming, and somehow always saying the right thing at the right time. We'd spend endless evenings talking about everything from our childhood memories to our dreams for the future, planning out our lives together with the kind of certainty that only comes from young love and naive optimism. Things were getting serious between us, and I felt like I was living in one of those romance movies where everything just falls perfectly into place. One evening, as we were curled up on my couch, watching some forgettable show on Netflix, I decided it was time to take the next step. "I think you should meet my family," I said, running my fingers through his dark hair. "They're going to adore you. Even my sister will have to admit you're perfect." My sister Olivia was 24 and had recently graduated from university. She was still living with our parents while trying to figure out her next move in life. Growing up, we'd been inseparable despite the 2-year age gap between us, but lately, she'd become distant. I chalked it up to post-graduation anxiety and her struggles with job hunting. The family dinner was scheduled for the following weekend. I spent hours getting ready, wanting everything to be absolutely perfect. Alex arrived with an expensive bottle of wine and a gorgeous bouquet of flowers, immediately winning my mother over. "Oh, Rachel," Mom gushed, pulling me aside in the kitchen. "He's absolutely wonderful! Such impeccable manners, and so handsome, too." I caught Olivia rolling her eyes from her spot at the counter, accompanied by a small scoff, but I chose to ignore it. I figured she was probably just jealous that I had my life together while she was still trying to find her footing in the world. The evening exceeded my wildest expectations. Dad and Alex bonded over their shared passion for rock climbing. Mom couldn't stop praising his career achievements in software development, and even Olivia's frosty attitude seemed to thaw slightly by dessert. As we were leaving, Mom hugged me tight and whispered, "Don't let this one get away, sweetheart." Within weeks, Alex and I were discussing marriage. It wasn't a traditional proposal with bended knee and diamond rings. We just naturally fell into the conversation one night over dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant. "We could do it in 6 months," he suggested, reaching across the table to take my hand. Nothing too extravagant, just family and close friends. My parents were ecstatic when we shared the news. They immediately insisted on covering half the wedding expenses, with Alex's parents taking care of the other half. Throughout the entire conversation, Olivia sat quietly, picking at her food and occasionally making these little huffing sounds that everyone pretended not to notice. The next 5 months became a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Every spare moment was filled with decisions about flowers, cake tastings, venue visits, and countless meetings with vendors. I was running myself ragged, trying to balance my job with wedding planning, often staying late at the office to meet with our wedding coordinator. Little did I know that Tuesday afternoon would change everything. The day started normally enough. I had a morning meeting with the florist and was supposed to work late again to finalize the reception timeline. But around 2 p.m., I developed a splitting headache. My boss took one look at my pale face and sent me home to rest. I thought I'd surprise Alex. He usually worked from home on Tuesdays, and I figured we could order takeout and have a quiet evening together. Maybe he could even help me with some of the wedding tasks that were piling up on my to-do list. The apartment was quiet when I unlocked the door, but I heard muffled sounds coming from our bedroom. I assumed Alex was on a work call. He often took them in there for better sound quality. I'll never forget what I saw when I opened that door. Standing in that doorway, time froze. Alex and Olivia were tangled in my sheets, our sheets, the ones I'd bought just a month ago for our new bed. My sister, my fiancé. The sight hit me like a physical blow, leaving me struggling to breathe. Olivia didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She just stared at me with this almost bored expression, like I'd interrupted her during a casual coffee break. The look in her eyes spoke volumes, not of guilt or regret, but of something closer to irritation. "Rachel, Alex started scrambling to get up. Baby, I can explain. Something inside me snapped. Without a word, I walked to the closet, gathered their scattered clothes, and marched straight to our third-floor balcony. The cool metal of the railing pressed against my palms as I stood there, my mind oddly clear. "Rachel, don't!" Alex called out, but it was too late. I watched with grim satisfaction as their clothes scattered across the parking lot below, carried by the afternoon breeze like confetti at some twisted celebration. "Get out!" I said, my voice eerily calm. "Both of you! Now!" Olivia had to wrap herself in our Egyptian cotton sheets, the wedding gift from Alex's mother, because all her clothes were now decorating the asphalt. 3 stories below. The sight of her trying to maintain dignity while shuffling toward the door would have been comical if I hadn't felt like my heart was being ripped from my chest. As soon as they were out, I slammed the door and collapsed against it, sliding down to sit on the floor. The hardwood was cold beneath me, but I barely felt it. I don't know how long I sat there trying to make sense of what had just happened, watching shadows lengthen across the wall as the sun began to set. When my phone rang, Mom's name flashing on the screen, I felt a moment of relief. Surely she was calling to comfort me, to tell me everything would be okay. I couldn't have been more wrong. "How dare you humiliate your sister like that?" she hissed as soon as I answered. "Throwing their clothes out the window, making her walk out in a sheet? What were you thinking?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What was I thinking? What was she thinking? "She was in bed with my fiancé. You're always so dramatic, Rachel." "This is exactly why, Mom." I cut her off, my voice stronger than I felt. "The wedding is canceled. I'll contact the vendors tomorrow." "No, you won't," she interrupted, her tone unnaturally calm. "The wedding is still happening. Your father and I talked it over with Alex's parents. We spoke with Alex and Olivia too. The wedding will proceed as planned. Olivia will take your place." 5 words. 5 simple words that felt like a physical blow. I actually looked down at myself, checking for visible wounds. Surely something that painful must leave a mark. "You can't be serious," I whispered. That's insane. You can't just..." "We've paid for half this wedding," Mom cut in sharply. "Alex's parents have paid for their half. Everything is booked and paid for. We're not throwing all that money away just because you're having a tantrum." "A tantrum?" My voice rose with each word. "My fiancé and my sister were in my bed. How is that a tantrum?" "Rachel," she sighed, "like I was a child refusing to share my toys. You need to grow up and stop being so emotional about everything." These things happen. The line went dead. I don't remember much of that night. I know I cried until I had no tears left. I know I screamed into my pillows until my throat was raw. I know I threw up twice, my body physically revolting against the betrayal. The morning sun found me curled up on the bathroom floor, still in yesterday's clothes. Mascara streaked down my face and my phone buzzing with unread messages I couldn't bring myself to look at. It wasn't until around 9 a.m. that I saw my cousin Hannah's name flash across the screen. She was the only family member I felt I could trust, the only one who'd always been straight with me. "Rachel," her voice was hesitant. "I just got off the phone with your mom." She paused, and I could hear her struggling to find the right words. "She's been calling everyone in the family." My stomach dropped. "What's she saying?" "She's telling everyone that Alex broke up with you because he fell in love with Olivia. She's saying it was all very civil and mature, but you're not handling it well." Hannah's voice got quieter. "They're telling everyone the wedding is still on, just with Olivia instead." I closed my eyes, willing myself not to throw up again. "What else?" "They're telling everyone not to contact you for a while. They're saying you're behaving inappropriately and need time to process things properly." The bathroom tiles were cool against my forehead as I leaned against the wall. My entire family was being turned against me. My parents were painting me as the villain in their twisted narrative, protecting my cheating, betraying sister while isolating me completely. Fury burned through me that morning, but it wasn't the destructive kind. Instead, it crystallized into something harder, colder, and more focused. I made my decision right there on that bathroom floor. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a scandal. I wouldn't cry, scream, or beg. I would simply disappear from their lives, as completely as they had erased me from theirs. Looking back now, that moment on the bathroom floor wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of something else entirely. Something they never saw coming. The next morning, I walked into my boss, Sarah's office, before she'd even had her first coffee. My eyes were still puffy from crying, but my voice didn't waver. "I need more work," I told her, standing straight despite my exhaustion. "The most challenging projects you've got." "I want them all." Sarah studied me over her reading glasses, taking in my wrinkled clothes and determined expression. I could see the questions in her eyes, but she didn't ask them. Instead, she opened her desk drawer and pulled out a thick file. "The Morrison account," she said, sliding it across her desk. "Nobody's been able to crack it. It's yours if you want it." That weekend, I found a new apartment, a small studio across town in a neighborhood where I knew my family would never look for me. I changed my phone number, blocked every family member on social media, and threw myself into work like it was the only life raft in an ocean of pain. The Morrison account? I cracked it in 2 weeks. The impossible Johnson project that had been gathering dust for months completed a month ahead of schedule. Every challenge Sarah threw at me, I conquered. I worked 14-hour days, took online courses at night, and studied our competitors like my life depended on it. Working became my therapy, my escape, my revenge. It was the only thing that kept me from thinking about them, about how Olivia and Alex were probably living there happily, ever after in the house we'd planned to buy, about how my parents were surely doting on their good daughter while telling everyone what a shame it was about their eldest. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened steadily, relentlessly. Like water wearing away stone, I rebuilt myself one day at a time. A year passed, and I got promoted to senior manager. Another year, and I became director of operations. By the 3rd year, I was the youngest vice president in the company's history. My salary tripled. I bought a gorgeous apartment in the city center, the kind of place Alex and I used to walk past and dream about. But I bought it on my own, with my own money, and every time I walked through those doors, I felt a fierce pride that had nothing to do with anyone else. I started traveling, first taking small trips, weekend getaways to nearby cities, then bigger ones, Paris in spring, Tokyo in fall, the Greek islands in summer. I posted photos of all of it on Instagram, not to show off, but to remind myself how far I'd come. Each picture was a milestone, marking another step away from the woman who'd collapsed on that bathroom floor. 3 years. 3 years of not hearing their voices, not sitting at their dinner table, not knowing anything about their lives except the one fact I couldn't escape, that Olivia had married Alex. I heard it from Hannah, who mentioned it casually during one of our rare text exchanges, probably testing to see if I'd react. I didn't, because by then, I was happy. Really, genuinely happy, not the kind of happiness I thought I had with Alex, which was all about pleasing other people and fitting into their expectations. This was a deeper contentment, one that came from knowing exactly who I was and what I was capable of. I built a new life for myself, brick by brick, choice by choice. My apartment became my sanctuary, filled with art I'd collected from my travels and furniture. I'd chosen myself. My career became my passion, not just a job but a calling. I made new friends, real friends who knew my story and stood by me without judgment. The woman who'd walked in on her sister and fiancé that day, she was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who'd learned that the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. But life has a funny way of coming full circle. And just when I thought I'd finally closed that chapter of my life completely, my phone rang one ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I stared at the unknown number on my screen, debating whether to answer. Something, intuition maybe, or just morbid curiosity made me pick up. "Hello?" "Rachel." My mother's voice came through, saccharine sweet. "Sweetheart, is that you?" The sound of her voice, unchanged after all these years, made my teeth hurt. She was speaking as if we'd just talked yesterday, as if nothing had ever happened, as if she hadn't chosen her younger daughter over me, hadn't helped orchestrate my replacement in my own wedding. 3 years of carefully constructed peace trembled on the edge of a precipice. I had a choice to make, and this time, I was ready for it. "What do you want?" I kept my voice neutral, professional, the same tone I used in board meetings. The fake cheerfulness in her voice cracked slightly. Your father and I need to talk to you. Could you come to the house? Please? We've had some serious discussions about everything. About you." I should have hung up. I should have blocked this number like all the others. Instead, I heard myself saying, "When? Saturday? Around 6? I'll make your favorite dinner." "Fine." I hung up before she could say anything else. The week crawled by. I threw myself into work even harder than usual, trying not to think about the upcoming visit. My assistant caught me staring at my calendar more than once, the Saturday appointment glaring at me like an accusation. When the day arrived, I spent an hour getting ready, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, designer outfit carefully chosen. If I was walking into the lion's den, I was going to do it looking like someone they couldn't touch anymore. I drove my Tesla slowly through my old neighborhood, noting how little had changed. But when I pulled up to my parents' house, I barely recognized it. The place looked tired, worn down. The garden my mother had once prided herself on was overgrown. The paint was peeling, and the front steps needed repair. I didn't bother knocking. This wasn't a social call. The inside of the house hit me with a wave of memories I wasn't prepared for. The same furniture, the same photos on the walls, though I noticed they'd removed all the ones with me in them. Even the same smell of Mom's vanilla candles. And there they all were, arranged like some twisted family portrait. My parents, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Olivia, with 2 small children clinging to her legs, one looking about 2, the other barely a year old, and Alex, standing beside her with his hand on her shoulder, looking exactly the same except for a slight paunch around his middle. I waited for the pain, for the rage, for any of the emotions that had nearly destroyed me 3 years ago. But there was nothing. They were strangers to me now, as irrelevant as the peeling wallpaper behind them. Olivia's eyes ran over my outfit, my bag, my carefully curated appearance. "You look good," she said, envy dripping from every word. I smiled, all teeth. "Amazing what you can accomplish when you don't waste time plotting to steal other people's fiancés." "Rachel," Mom's voice held that familiar note of disapproval. "Please, everyone, let's just sit down and have a nice dinner." I picked at the overcooked chicken on my plate, not really hungry but needing something to focus on besides the awkward silence around the table. The children, my supposed niece and nephew, were the only ones making any noise, the younger one banging a spoon against his high chair while the older one whined about his peas. Mom cleared her throat. "We've been following your success, Rachel. Those photos you post. That apartment of yours looks absolutely beautiful. Right in the heart of downtown, isn't it?" I took a sip of water, not responding. "And your job, Vice President? We're all so..." She glanced at Olivia, who was staring intently at her plate, point so impressed with how well you're doing. "Why am I here?" I put my fork down. "Because I know it's not to discuss my social media posts." Mom's smile faltered slightly. She pushed her food around her plate before speaking again. "Well, you see, things have been a bit difficult lately. Your father, why don't you tell her, dear?" Dad looked older than his years as he spoke. "I lost my job 3 months ago. Budget cuts. After 30 years with the company, I've had to pick up extra shifts at the hospital," Mom jumped in, "just to keep up with the bills. The mortgage, utilities, everything's so expensive these days." And of course, with Olivia staying home with the kids, Mom gestured toward my sister, who was now trying to clean something off her younger child's face. "They're managing on just Alex's salary, but with 2 little ones. What exactly does any of this have to do with me?" I asked, though I was starting to see where this was going. Mom's face brightened, apparently missing or choosing to ignore my tone. "Well, we were thinking, Olivia really needs to find a job, but childcare is so expensive these days, and since you have such a flexible position..." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. "It didn't come. Are you?" I started laughing. "I couldn't help it. Are you seriously suggesting that I should babysit for them?" "You have that big apartment," Mom continued enthusiastically, "and I'm sure you could work from home some days. The children are really very well behaved." The 2-year-old chose that moment to throw his sippy cup across the room while screaming at top volume. "This is a joke, right?" I looked around the table. "You're not actually asking me to babysit the children of my sister and my ex-fiancé?" "Well," Dad cleared his throat, "if you're not comfortable with that arrangement, you could help pay for a proper babysitter, given your salary." I sat back in my chair, genuinely amazed at their audacity. They had ambushed me, invited me here, served me my mother's mediocre cooking, all to ask me to either play nanny to my sister's kids or open my wallet for them. The fury I thought I'd left behind 3 years ago came rushing back. But this time, it was different. This time, it came with power. "No," I said, standing up. "Absolutely not. I will not be your babysitter, and I will not be your ATM. Rachel." Mom's concerned mask slipped, revealing the anger beneath. "How dare you be so selfish after everything we've done for you?" Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the plates rattle. "You ungrateful, greedy girl. You're sitting there in your designer clothes, living in your luxury apartment, while your sister can barely afford diapers." "My sister's financial situation is not my problem," I said, my voice ice cold. "You all made your choices 3 years ago. You chose her. You chose him. You made it very clear where your loyalties lay. Now you get to live with those choices." I walked out to the sound of their screaming, their voices following me down the driveway. Alex had the sense to stay quiet, but I could hear my parents calling me every name in the book while Olivia wailed about her children. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, my phone started blowing up with notifications. Mom had posted a lengthy screed on Facebook about her heartless daughter who had forgotten her roots and abandoned her struggling family in their time of need. The comments started rolling in immediately. How could she be so cruel to her own sister? "Those poor babies need their aunt. Money changes people." These were coming from relatives who knew what had happened 3 years ago, people who had seen the whole drama unfold. And yet, here they were, piling on, sending me private messages about how I needed to get over it and help my family. I blocked them all. Every single one. Aunts, uncles, cousins. They disappeared from my social media one by one. I didn't bother explaining or defending myself. They had chosen their side long ago, but my family wasn't done. I was in the middle of a meeting with our biggest client when my assistant burst in looking panicked. "Miss Parker, the first so sorry to interrupt, but your family is in the lobby. Your sister has 2 crying children with her, and your parents are demanding to speak to Mr. Davidson." I apologized to my client and rushed to the lobby. Sure enough, there they were. Mom and Dad making a scene at the reception desk while Olivia stood there with both kids, who were screaming their heads off. People were staring. Phones were out, recording. "We demand to speak to whoever's in charge," Dad was shouting. "She can't treat her family this way. We'll see what her boss has to say about this." I walked up to the head of security, Marcus, who was already moving toward the situation. "Those people are not allowed in this building," I said clearly. "Please remove them." I watched as Marcus efficiently cleared them from the lobby, their shouts echoing off the marble floors. He came back to me afterward, looking concerned. "Would you like us to call the police, Miss Parker?" "No," I said, straightening my jacket. "Just make sure they're on the ban list. They're not to be allowed in the building under any circumstances." They didn't stop. Somehow they got my new address. I came home one evening to find them camped outside my building's entrance. Olivia was there with the kids again, using them as emotional blackmail while Mom and Dad tried to force their way in behind other residents. "We're not leaving until you help your sister," Mom shouted as I called building security. They showed up at random times after that, pounding on my door, screaming through it about family obligations and what a horrible person I was. I started taking different routes home, varying my schedule, looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. It was when they started contacting my colleagues and business associates that I finally broke. I'd been trying to handle it on my own, thinking they'd eventually give up, but they were escalating instead of backing down. I called my cousin Hannah, who'd remained neutral through everything, and asked for a recommendation. "I know a great lawyer," she said. "She handles family cases, restraining orders, that sort of thing. Her name's Michelle Torres." Michelle turned out to be exactly what I needed: tough, practical, and completely unfazed by family drama. She helped me organize everything: screenshots of every message, security footage from my building and office, witness statements from my doorman and colleagues, copies of their social media posts, records of every attempt they'd made to contact me after being told to stop. "We're asking for a restraining order," Michelle explained as we prepared for court. They'll be legally barred from approaching you, your home, or your workplace. No contact through any means, physical, digital, or through third parties. And we're requesting $15,000 in damages for emotional distress and reputation damage. As I sat in my apartment that night, reviewing the court documents, I realized something. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just done. I wasn't prepared for how it would feel to see them in court. They looked smaller somehow, less threatening under the fluorescent lights. Olivia had left the kids at home for once, though she still managed to cry on cue. When called to testify, their defense was weak. They were just trying to help their daughter reconnect with her family. They were worried about me. They just wanted me to see my nephews. The judge wasn't impressed. The evidence of harassment is clear and substantial, he said in his ruling. The restraining order is granted in full. The defendants are to have no contact with the plaintiff through any means, direct or indirect. The court awards the requested damages of $15,000. This is ridiculous, Mom jumped up screaming. We're her parents! We have rights! Dad shouted at me. Olivia dissolved into hysterics, wailing about her children again. The judge's gavel cracked like a gunshot. One more outburst and I'll hold you all in contempt. Furthermore, given your behavior in my courtroom, I'm adding a $5,000 fine for each defendant. That was 6 months ago. The restraining order works. They can't come near me, contact me, or post about me online. The damages and fines hit them hard financially, from what Hannah tells me, though I try not to think about them at all. These days, my life has found a new rhythm. I wake up each morning in my peaceful apartment, the sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and I feel nothing but gratitude. My work continues to challenge and fulfill me. I've just been put in charge of our international expansion project, something I never would have dreamed possible 4 years ago. I've started dating again, cautiously, not looking for anything serious, just enjoying the company of people who know nothing about my past and accept me as I am now. Last month, I took a solo trip to Bali, spending 2 weeks exploring temples and beaches, meeting travelers from around the world who've become genuine friends. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I think about how different my life would be if I hadn't walked in on them that day. I probably would have married Alex, had children, lived the life everyone expected me to live. I would have been content maybe, but not truly happy, not truly myself. I don't know what they're doing now. I don't know if Olivia and Alex are still together, if the kids are growing up happy, if my parents have learned anything from all this. And the beautiful thing is, I don't care. Their lives, their choices, their problems, none of it matters to me anymore. The other day, I was having coffee with a colleague who knew my story. She asked if I ever regretted cutting ties with my family so completely. Family is everything, she said, echoing the words my mother used to throw at me like weapons. Don't you miss having them in your life? I thought about it for a moment, watching the steam rise from my cup. The thing about family, I finally answered, is that it's supposed to be the people who love you unconditionally, who support you when you're at your lowest, who choose you even when it's hard. My biological family failed at all of that. But in losing them, I found something better. I found myself. Looking back now, I realized that Tuesday afternoon 4 years ago wasn't just the day my world fell apart, it was the day my real life began. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us turn out to be the best things for us. Sometimes betrayal leads to freedom. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out who you really are. They say living well is the best revenge, but I'm not even interested in revenge anymore. I'm just living well, and that's more than enough. It's everything. As I write this from my office overlooking the city, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I feel nothing but peace. The woman who walked in on her sister and fiancé that day died in that moment, but the woman who rose from those ashes, she's stronger than I ever imagined possible, and she's just getting started. Story 2, I'm Emma, a 34-year-old photojournalist who just became a full-time mother. The little bundle of happiness sleeping in the next room had taken center stage in my world, which had previously been captured by my camera. But behind the surface of this newfound parenthood, something was missing. Our once loved haven, the house, seemed to be a hollow echo of what it had been. The grandeur of the terrace, where Alex and I used to share dreams over morning coffees, now seemed to mock me with its emptiness. The garden, well cared for, remained motionless, a witness to the widening gulf between us. The day I returned home from the hospital is still fresh in my mind. Our baby boy cradled in my arms. I expected warmth, tears of joy, something, anything. Instead, Alex greeted us with a glance that barely hid his indifference. "Honey, aren't you excited? Say hello to your son." I pushed, attempting to hide my voice's tremor. Alex hardly gave our baby a look. His eyes voided the spark I used to know. "Yes, he is excellent. You know, I'm simply not good with infants. Give me time." The infant wasn't the only one. The Alex I knew, the one I fell in love with, appeared to have fled. He had come home from work every day. A mask of exhaustion covered his face, his statements scant and empty. One evening, as I rocked our son to sleep, the silence became unbearable. "Alex, we need to talk. This separation between us. You mean it's not only about the baby?" He sighed, his attention fixed on some distant point beyond the walls of our once happy home. "Emma, don't start. I'm worn out. I don't think I need another lecture at work." I felt a pang of anger mixed with a dose of fear. "Lecture. Look at us, Alex, at our family. I'm with your father now. I feel like I'm working alone on this." He finally glanced at me, his eyes chilly, distant. "Emma, what do you want from me? A parade? I'm present. I'm working. I'm supplying. What else would you like?" The words stung, each one. A reminder of the distance between us that had grown. "I want you, Alex. The man I married. The man who vowed to be at my side. Not a shadow that haunts this house." He got to his feet, his irritation clear. "This is too much for me to handle at this time. Emma, I'm not the enemy. Maybe you're the one who transformed life after bringing our baby home." It wasn't the happy image I had conjured up. It was more like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit. The item that had changed the most was Alex, the man I had promised to live with forever. His late nights at work were becoming a pattern, a repeat of a past I believed we had buried deep. One frigid evening, while I cuddled our kid, attempting to quiet his fussiness, the monotony was broken by the creaking sound of the entrance door. Alex avoided looking into my eyes as he walked with his face drawn. Once more, I returned late. I murmured, my voice tinged with a fatigue that went beyond bodily. Alex simply tossed his keys on the table and grunted. "Work's a mess. You wouldn't comprehend." The severity in his tone hurt. "Wouldn't comprehend. Alex? I've been there. Do you recall late hours spent in the studio?" "The due dates, I understand. However, this is not the same. You're unique," he sneered. He was pulling his tie loose. "How is it different? Since I'm attempting to support this family." "Because every minute I'm not leaping with happiness." I carefully chose my words and slapped back the response that sprang out of my mouth. "The goal is not to supply Alex. It's about being present. You seldom give your son a glance. You seldom ever speak to me. It's like you're here, but you're not." He gave me a quick glance before hardening his gaze. "Emma, what do you want from me? Every day I'm working really hard." Returning home to this. All I get are complaints. After he made hazy gestures around the room. The pain was intense. Real complaints. "Do you believe this to be that, Alex? I'm concerned for us." "How about you? You avoid us, I notice. How you're pulling away. It makes me think. It reminds me of before." The air became cold. Alex's face tensed, his jaw straining. "Before you bring it up once more." "Emma, I thought we were over it. I believed we had decided to put that behind us." I embraced our son. The cold between us was sharply contrasted with his little warmth. "Get rid of it." "Alex, how can I when you're behaving just as you did in the past? The stillness, the distance, the late nights. Everything seems too familiar." He flung up his hands, frustration oozing from him. "So what? You believe I'm cheating again? Is that it? You think I haven't changed?" There was a lingering question, hefty and unwanted. "Alex, I'm not sure. I am unsure about my thoughts. All I know is that we are being torn apart by something that is wrong." His worry was ripping us apart, as seen by the way he ran a hand through his hair. "Perhaps your frequent allegations are to blame. Have you ever considered that? Perhaps you are the one preventing us from progressing." He abruptly left the room, leaving a silence that was more deafening than any argument. When my phone rang with a notification, a message from an unknown sender, it was just another ordinary afternoon. I opened it out of curiosity, not realizing that a few lines would soon destroy the delicate harmony in my universe. "I think it's time you get to know me, Emma, even though you don't. Alex has been leading two separate lives. The other woman is me." My heart stopped beating. This must have been a terrible joke. But then I noticed the linked photos. Alex. With kids too, not just this mother. There were 3 of them, and they all looked like the man I called my husband. Alex arrived earlier than normal while I was still in shock. Returning so quickly? With a whispery voice, I managed to utter it. Clearly unaware of the anger brewing within of me, he shrugged. Yes. The office was a sluggish place. The image of him with that woman and the kids filled the screen of my phone as I held it up. Is this how you pass the time? Slow? The veneer of indifference vanished in a flash, and his face became white. Emma. What? Where did you purchase this? Every word she spoke made me feel heavy, like a stone descending in the pit of my stomach. Alex. Your other lady is you. I kept my gaze fixed on him while he reached for the phone. Then, it's true? The distance. The late hours. It was more than labor. It was them. Alex fell into a chair. His facade crumbled. Emma, it's not what you think, listen. I let out a hollow laugh that reverberated through the quiet. Not what I believe, Alex. The images are truthful. You have a whole different family. For what length of time? You've been lying to me for how long? His face was buried in his hands. For a few years, a defeated figure. It began modestly. I had no intention of it getting this far, a few years. The lingering phrases were evidence of the deception my life had devolved into. What about the kids? Alex. Do you own them? He didn't have to respond, but he didn't. The years of dishonesty, the pictures, and the silence all contained the truth. Now, Alex, you must go. Despite the pandemonium within, I spoke steadily. And with that, our narrative came to an end with the sound of the door closing. Holding our baby, the only tangible object in the chaos that was my life, I sat there by myself. Just when the dust seemed to be settling, life chose to throw another curveball. I was in the middle of nursing my son when the doorbell rang, breaking the afternoon silence as I waited for a neighbor or even a delivery. I was utterly taken away to see Alex looking bashful, and a woman I knew from the images. Before I could even react, the other woman was standing confidently at my doorway. She shoved through me and inside the house. Her gaze wandered, absorbing every aspect of the house I had invested so much time and energy into. Emma, this is quite the location you're in. Roomy and comfortable. Ideal for a family. Alex, don't you think? With a tone full of entitlement and derision, she spoke. Alex avoided looking at me, his voice quiet but his shame obvious. I tried to remain calm in the face of this incursion by clenching my jaw. What kind of family is that? Because this was my house when I last looked. Standing guard in front of my son's cot, I shot back. With a calculating gleam in her eye, she grinned. The family that Alex ought to have been with from the beginning. Me and our 3 children. We need this place more than you do, you see. A large, lovely home for a large family. You get it? Correct? Her statement's boldness touched a chord. I was furious. Every word she spoke fueled my rage. You get it? I completely get it. If you think you can just go in here and claim what's mine, you're insane. Neither you nor Alex have any claim to this residence. When Alex did speak, it was hardly more than a whisper. Emma, perhaps we ought to talk about this. Talk about it? My patience was running low until I snapped. After everything, you think we'll just sit down and talk about you giving your mistress and your other kids my house? Like a hawk, the lady paced around her eyes, looking around the room. Look, it's easy, Emma. Kid, you've got one. A little flat will suffice. We have 3. We require the room? It's just. I kept hearing the word. Considering all that was going on, it was a terrible joke. Just. Do you wish to discuss fairness? Betraying someone, lying, or destroying a family are all unfair. You don't know what fair is. She looked to Alex for confirmation. Inform her, Alex. Inform her that you will be moving in. She has 1 week to get away. Alex looked away. He sagged his shoulder. the image of timidity and failure. Emma, I'm at a loss for words. There were many threats and unsaid remarks in the air during the tense standoff. However, as they walked away, Alex not even daring to turn around and the woman glaring over her shoulder, I realized that this was far from finished. Alex and his mistress slammed the door behind them, leaving me standing in my house in quiet. My thoughts are racing. The audacity of them to enter my home and threaten to seize everything I valued. But as the immediate shock receded, a strategy began to shape. The moment has come to tell the truth. It was time to take back what was mine. The chime of the doorbell sounded like the opening of a brawl. They were standing there. Alex was more defeated than ever, and his mistress's haughtiness remained unabated. It's time to go, Emma. Our goal is to move in. Have you packed your belongings? She made a demand. Her eyes were shining with victory. I maintained a solid attitude as I stood in the doorway. I didn't actually pack. You're not going to move in either. I have the paperwork to verify that this house is mine. The woman's expression wavered, rage mingled with bewilderment. What are you discussing? This is also Alex's home. We are entitled to certain rights. I couldn't resist grinning. At last, the tables are turning. That's where you're mistaken, you see. My parents gave me this house as a gift. None of the documents had Alex's name on them. This property is not his to claim. Uncomfortably, Alex moved away from me. I thought we could figure things out, Emma. Figure something out. When you attempted to evict your kid and me from our house after lying and cheating. Not in my opinion, Alex. With a panicked, loud voice, the mistress interrupted. This isn't possible. You're telling lies, Alex. Inform her that she is lying. However, Alex said nothing, his eyes sad. At last, the reality of the situation hit him. It's not a falsehood. My voice was steady as I spoke. You have no legal right to be in my house. It is mine. So before I contact the cops, I advise you go. The females. I began to ask Alex for confirmation, or even denial. However, Alex remained silent and lowered his head. The reality is too much to handle. However, we are a family. This home is necessary. You cannot simply dismiss us. With a hint of desperation in her voice, she objected. The falsehoods are the only thing I'm discarding, I retorted. While we're at it, how about we discuss Alex's employment? He's not the eminent business magnate you believe him to be. He works at an office as a clerk. This home fulfills your fantasies of living a luxurious lifestyle. Dreams. Her face twisted in anger and amazement as the realization struck her like a physical blow. A clerk. You're telling lies. Tell her she's lying, Alex. Alex, however, remained mute, his shoulders sunk in disappointment. The act had ended. The truth was exposed for everyone to see. Alex's lies have been feeding your fantasy. But it's over now. With a forceful voice, I declared, You have no place here. You two need to get out of here. Tension and unspoken comments filled the air throughout the heated exchange. However, the mistress's final look was laced with bitterness and promises of retaliation as they turned to go. This isn't the end, Emma. This is something you'll regret. Broken by the harsh light of reality, she kissed her fantasies. The morning was clear and cool, the kind that typically promised a calm beginning. However, I could no longer afford the luxury of calm. The doorbell's ringing sound broke. Through a window, the silence is as serene as a rock. I opened the door. My heart fell. She was standing there, the mistress of Alex. A smirk wrinkled her face. Behind her, her kids crowded. Once again, you're displaying some nerve. Despite the chaos within, I spoke steadily. The mistress remained steadfast. Emma, I have every right. These children. She pointed to the naive expressions behind her. They are worthy of a decent home. Your house? I couldn't help but scoff. Well deserved. Only a reality check is what you deserve. My home is here, and you are not welcome. Her voice became louder as her grin grew. Oh, I'm not welcome. We'll investigate that. Do you really believe you can sit here in this large, opulent home by yourself with your infant while my children suffer? You're colder than I imagined. Sharp and accusatory, her remarks were intended to cause pain. And they did. But I wasn't going to show her how callous that was. I'm not the one upsetting lives and shattering families. That was all your own doing. Her shrill voice had attracted the neighbors, who had started to huddle their whispers in the background like a chorus. Her antics reached new heights as she enjoyed the crowd. "People, take a look! Here, Emma believes she is too good to share. Believes herself and her child alone in this mansion. How about my kids? Do they not also deserve a home?" I fought the need to smash the door in her face by clenching my hands. "Your kids are worthy of better, definitely. Better than a mother who plays twisted games with them as pawns." Anger flaring in her eyes, she took a step closer. "Emma, do you believe you can judge me? You, who received everything as a gift from you. Every small thing in my children's life has required them to battle, and now you wish to deny them a place to live?" I gave a head shake. I'm feeling angry and incredulous. "I'm not withholding anything from them, their dad. You took the man away from me. You ought to be focusing on him. It is him who has let them down. How about you?" The mistress's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water as her cheeks flushed. "We were promised a better life by Alex. We'll have this house," he said. "Will you stand there and tell me that all of those statements were false?" Her comments were a bitter reminder of Alex's treachery, and they lingered in the air. Alex's promises don't mean anything anymore, apparently. However, one thing is certain. His hollow promises do not include this house. I own it. Furthermore, you are not entitled to it. She bristled, her composure slipping. "Emma, I'm not going anywhere. Not until you treat these children fairly. If I have to, I'll set up camp here. I will ensure that everyone is aware of the type of heartless witch that resides in this home." As I gazed at her, the ridiculousness of the circumstance struck me hard. "You're going to camp out on my property? Not in my opinion. This is your final caution. I'll call the cops if you don't leave now." Her audience consisted of the neighbors who were gathered around. However, my voice's resolution must have struck a chord. Her parting shot was a poisonous stare as she gathered her kids. "Emma, this isn't over. You've only begun a war, but you believe you've won." My house was still plagued by the events from the previous week, unable to let go. Before the doorbell rang again, I was Emma, a lady who believed she had witnessed everything, bringing a chapter. One believed I had closed. Alex was standing on my porch, his expression a combination of desperation and sorrow. After everything, seeing him made me angry in ways I didn't realize I had. "Alex, what are you doing here? Have you not gone far enough?" Sharp and brutal, I spat out what I had spoken. His hands were twitching uneasily as he glanced down. "I need to talk to you, Emma. It's crucial." Unwavering in my posture, I crossed my arms. "Speak. After your attempt to take me home, following all of the falsehoods. You had to be joking." He took a deep gulp, a guy struggling to make ends meet. "Emma, please. I was wrong. An enormous error. I see that now. I was completely mistaken." I couldn't contain my laughter. The sound is empty and harsh. "An error. What do you call that?" "Alex, you ruined our family. She was your choice. Choose to live that life. And you're here now. What?" Asking for forgiveness. His gaze locked with me. In their depths, a flicker of the man I once knew. "Emma, not just forgiveness. I'd like to return. For you, I want to put things right. For our kid." I was dumbfounded by the bluster of his request. What was he doing standing there pleading for another chance? As though he could use a few words to erase the past. "After everything, you want to return? You believe that you may just return to our life, as if nothing had occurred?" With each syllable, my voice rose as I begged. A desperate man grasping to a lifeline, he nodded. "Indeed, Emma. I want to try, even though I know I don't deserve it. I'll do anything, everything to compensate you. To our son." I gave a headshake. I was aware that my choice was definitive. "It's too late, Alex. You must now live with the decision you made. Without you, we're going on." With disappointment engraved on every line of his face, his shoulder dropped. "Please don't do this, Emma. Consider our son. His father is essential to him." My heart ached for the life we may have had, for the family that was irreparably damaged. He was in need of his dad. Where were you too? Alongside her. Alongside them? "Alex, you're not the man we need. You need to understand that." He continued to stand there for a minute, an individual lost amid the wreckage of his own creation. Then he turned and left without saying another word, his form vanishing into the darkness. The last remnants of my former existence had vanished, making room for something fresh, something that is mine. Alex was now only a memory of my past once the divorce papers were completed. My door was no longer shadowed by a shadow. He was mandated to provide our kid with alimony, a little justice in the overall context. Seated in my peaceful living room, I thought back on the turbulent trip. The stillness was broken by the buzzing of the phone. Lisa was the one. The most recent rumors were carried in her voice. "You won't believe this, Emma." Alex shares a little flat with his mistress. "Word is, they do nothing but fight day in and day out." There was an unavoidable sense of vindication in me. "Well, can't say I'm shocked. You reap what you sow, right?" Lisa laughed. "It's true. However, how are you doing? This must all be difficult." The warmth of my tea was pleasant as I took a drink. "I'm getting there, Lisa, but it's been a journey. Each day seems a bit lighter, a bit more mine. You're the strongest person I know, Emma." "Hey, I'm only a phone call away if you need anything." "Okay." Her words were a salve that eased the pain of the past. "Regards, Lisa." "Thank you very much." Lighter subjects took over the discourse. A pleasant change was the return to normalcy. I hung up and looked around the room. This was my haven, my place. There were scars from the fights waged inside these fortifications. However, they were transforming into tales of fortitude and resiliency and healing. I took up my camera, an old buddy that I had forgotten about, and my hands felt comfortable. I took a few photos of my son's toy room and the life that was gradually coming back together. Each click of the camera was a proclamation, a statement that while the past was a part of me, it didn't define me. That night, I murmured promises of a bright and burden-free future to my kid as I put him to bed, his small hand gripping my finger. A huge canvas of possibilities stretched out in front of us, while the stars outside twinkled. A chapter had been closed between Alex and his mistress. A lesson discovered. The tale that really counted, ours, was only getting started. It was going to be a lovely one, too. Story 3, Emma is my name. I am a 30-year-old financial advisor. I met my now ex-husband David there. That day seems like it was yesterday to me. He entered my office with a pile of documents and wearing a distressed expression. "Emma." "Correct." Shaking his hand, he said, "My name is David Caldwell. I heard you're the greatest in straightening out financial difficulties." "That's the saying," I answered, smiling. "See what we can do to address yours." David had short brown hair, was tall, and had eyes that always seemed to grin. We began conversing while I went through his papers. Numbers and taxes weren't the only factors involved. We discussed our favorite music, movies, and even the greatest pizza in town. He exuded an easygoing demeanor that made house seem insignificant. As we concluded, David said, "You know, I never thought sorting my finances would be this enjoyable." "I guess I have a magic touch," I joked. David chuckled. "Do you want to go out for coffee sometime?" My reward for not experiencing as much agony as I had anticipated. Dinners became weekend vacations, and that coffee became supper. We couldn't be separated. 6 months later, David asked me to marry him, and I accepted right away. Although it was a fast-paced relationship, it seemed natural. Our wedding was modest yet gorgeous. Standing there exchanging vows, I thought I had found my forever. Barbara, David's mother, was also present. She was a tough-looking woman, yet appeared glad for us. With a half smile, she said to me, "You better give me grandchildren soon." At first, life as a married couple was wonderful. I stayed with my company, and David worked in real estate. We went on long walks, had movie evenings, and had supper together. We worked as a group, or so I thought. But as the subject of children was up more often, things started to shift. Barbara made sporadic comments at first, but it quickly became into a demand. During visits, she would inquire about my pregnancy and declare that having a grandchild would complete our family. David always dismissed it with a laugh. "Give us a little time, Mom." But the pressure was mounting, he would explain. At first, I tried to be understanding. She was simply a happy soon-to-be grandma after all. But I began to feel the weight of her perseverance. Without a kid, it seemed as though our marriage was insufficient. "Your mother should take a step back, David." One night I told him, "She seems more involved in our marriage than we are, in my opinion." David seemed uneasy. She's simply thrilled. "Emma, let's not get too worked up over it." Barbara's impact on our lives grew increasingly apparent over time. Her incessant begging for grandkids wasn't the only thing. She had opinions about everything from how we should manage our finances to what we should eat. David's phone rang one Saturday morning as we were eating brunch. Barbara was the one. As usual, David turned it on speaker. "Are both of you eating well, David? Recall that getting pregnant requires eating a nutritious diet," she said in her usual authoritative tone. David laughed. "Yes, Mother, we're eating healthy. Do not be concerned." I was screaming within, but I faked a grin. She seemed to be watching us all the time. When Barbara began coming to see us more often, things became more heated. She unexpectedly dropped over one evening with a bunch of parenting books. "You ought to start reading these, Emma. There's always time to get ready." Placing the books on the coffee table, she said. I looked to David in the hopes that he would respond, but he simply shrugged. "Regards, Barbara. We'll investigate them." I tried to seem appreciative as I spoke. Her visits started to happen often. It felt like she was keeping eyes on us, making sure we were doing everything correctly. To have a kid! And each time she raised the subject, David would simply agree with her by nodding. After another of Barbara's visits, I lost the ability to control myself one evening. "David, we must speak," I remarked, exasperation clear in my voice. "What is going on?" Without raising his gaze from the TV, he asked. "It's your mother." Her infantile speech is choking us. "Without her intervention, we seldom have time to spend as a couple," I said. At last, David turned to face me. "Emma, she's simply excited. She has good intentions. Enthusiastic or fixated?" I retorted. "In our marriage, she seems to be the third person." David let out a sigh. "She is my mother." "You want me to do what?" "Tell her to get over her concern." "It's not about caring, David. It's about honoring our own space and choices. Do you not notice that?" David remained silent. He simply looked back at the television. Our chat came to an end at that point. However, the problem did not end there. It simply grew worse, if anything. Barbara's visits increased in frequency, and her remarks grew increasingly invasive. "You two ought to take a trip. Simply unwind. It will aid in conception." One day, she said, Emma could want to resign from her position. "Decrease the stress," she said. Another time, she seemed to be controlling our lives, and David was allowing it. In my own marriage, I began to feel alienated. It appeared that David and I were losing the love and understanding that had previously bound us together. The continual strain of having a kid began to wear us both down, and we were lost in the shadow of Barbara's controlling presence. The romance that used to permeate our home appeared to have vanished, and David and I were fighting more frequently. Nevertheless, I clung to the belief that we would eventually reunite and that things would improve. The day that altered everything, however, arrived. One evening, David arrived home late and appeared more dejected than normal. I was attempting to quickly prepare dinner for us in the kitchen. "David, is everything all right?" Concerned, I asked. His face was buried in his hands as he sank into a chair at the kitchen table. "Emma, we must speak." I got a shiver at the tone of his speech. My heart was racing as I sat across from him. "We are attempting to conceive." He stopped looking into my eyes. "How about it?" I inquired. "I have a knot in my gut. We visited the physician." He eventually looked up at me and whispered, "Remember, for those tests." I gave a nod. "We went for a fertility test a few weeks ago in the hopes that it would end Barbara's persistent pestering." David inhaled deeply. "Today, the findings were received. Emma, it's not you, it's me." I experienced a range of feelings, including uncertainty, grief, and relief. "What are you saying?" "I have a poor sperm count," the doctor remarked. "My chances of fathering a kid are slim." His voice broke as he said. I tried to console him by reaching for his hand. "David, it's all right. Together, we can solve this. Treatment or other alternatives could be available." He shook his head and withdrew his hand. "You're not understanding. I am unable to. I refuse to get any kind of therapy. I'm just not capable of doing it." I was taken aback. "However, why, if there is a possibility?" "Emma, it's my choice. I simply cannot." He spoke aggressively. "What I was hearing was unbelievable." Without even trying, The man I loved, who always exuded strength and confidence, was giving up. "Don't let anything get in the way of our relationship, David. We can resolve it," I begged. He got up without looking at me. "I need some alone time to process all of this. And that's it." I sat there attempting to take it all in after he left the kitchen. Why he wouldn't even entertain therapy was beyond me. Was our opportunity to start a family more important than his pride? The days that followed were like treading very carefully. When David Barley did talk to me, it was brief and icy. I sensed that we were getting farther apart, a fissure in our marriage's foundation that appeared to be becoming bigger every day. Then the day arrived when the fissure became a huge hole. Once more, David had been out late. I pretended to be asleep in bed when he entered. He started talking on the phone, assuming I was asleep. "Yes, Mother. I received the findings. It's not good. No, therapy is not what I want. Yes, but I'm unable to. Yes, I will find a solution." It seemed betraying to hear him discuss something so private with his mother that he seldom ever talked about with me. I had no idea how much Barbara's shadow hung over our marriage, but it was evident. I felt completely alone as I laid there in the dark with tears running down my cheeks. I had no idea how to keep our marriage together, and everything was falling apart. At home, life had been intolerable. I was living under the same roof as David, and we were like strangers. It seemed like a faraway recollection of the warmth and affection that sought to enter our relationship. However, I had assumed that things couldn't get much worse. I was thrown a curveball by life. It had been some days since I felt ill. At first, I assumed it was simply stress, but then I missed my period. A part of me was afraid to consider it at all. I had to find out, though. I purchased a pregnancy test one morning, waiting for the outcome while seated in the restroom. It seemed like the longest few minutes I had ever experienced. Then there it was, a successful outcome. I was expecting a child. Just for a second, I was in amazement. It felt like a miracle after all the discussion about David's infertility. A glimmer of optimism in our failing marriage. But what would David think? That night, I made the decision to inform him. As usual, he arrived home late and hardly acknowledged me. I inhaled deeply before going up to him. "David, we must speak." With a quivering voice, I spoke. His face was tired as he raised his head. "Emma, what is it now?" "I'm expecting a child." I spoke without thinking. There was stillness for a while. Then he laughed a sarcastic, bitter chuckle. "Are you expecting? How? The physicians say that I can't. The test is positive, but I'm not sure. We are expecting a child." Tears filled my eyes as I said. His eyes flashed with wrath as he suddenly sprang up. "Is this a joke of any sort? Are you attempting to trap me?" I was surprised. "David, I'll trap you. We're going to have a baby. I promise. Our infant." He ran his hands through his hair as he walked the room. "This isn't possible. I'm sure you cheated." "Is that all there is to it? You cheated on me. It seemed as if someone had hit me." "Betrayed? How can you say that at all? I have only been true to you." He wasn't paying attention. He was too preoccupied with his own anger and incredulity. "Leave now. Get out of this house, please," he shouted. "Please, David, let's speak about this. To acquire a confirmation, we can see the doctor." I begged, but it felt like I was speaking to a blank wall. He slammed the door behind him and raced out of the room. I stayed in the guest room that night. A tornado of emotions swirled through my head. David was gone by the time I woke up the next day. Instead, his mother, Barbara, arrived. She had a mixture of revulsion and rage on her face. "Emma, you need to be ashamed of yourself. Entangling my kid with the offspring of another guy," she spat. "I didn't be unfaithful to David. He owns this child." I stood up for myself. She let forth a chilly, derisive chuckle. "You think I'm a fool? My son is unable to conceive. All you're doing is attempting to protect your future as a gold digger." Her harshness astounded me. "This child belongs to David. I've never been in a relationship." Her voice was poisonous as she stepped closer. "You've got a week to gather your belongings and depart. Additionally, don't even consider requesting child support or alimony. We won't give you a cent." The final straw was Barbara's ultimatum. I was aware that I couldn't stay in a home where there was constant animosity and blame. For the sake of the infants and myself, it was time to take charge of my life. First things first. I submitted a divorce petition. Although it was a difficult choice, it was essential. David and his mom made an effort to complicate things. They desired a portion of all that I owned. They said they had the right to do so, but I made a compelling argument. Long before David came into my life, I was the owner of all I had, including my property and assets. They were utterly unsuccessful in snatching what wasn't theirs. I didn't request any money in alimony. I didn't want to be financially connected to David. He and his mother have no right to meddle in my affairs ever again. I was resolved to begin a new life without their poison. I discovered a little flat that was comfortable enough for a new beginning, but not very opulent. It was heartbreaking to pack up my belongings from the house. There was a memory associated with each picture and item of furniture. However, I was prepared to part ways with them. David's absence on the day I moved out was noticeable. Perhaps he was unable to confront me. Or maybe he didn't give a damn. It didn't matter either way. I closed that chapter of my life and left the keys on the counter. My new apartment's initial nights were the most difficult. The reality of my circumstances frequently brought me to tears, and the quiet was deafening. However, the tiny life that was developing inside of me gave me comfort. My nightly habit of talking to my unborn child filled the void with love and optimism. My new flat gradually began to seem more like home and less like a haven. My routine gave me peace, and my relationship with my unborn child deepened every day. I came upon a picture of David and myself from a more carefree era one afternoon while going through some old stuff. I felt a twinge of grief, but it was soon overtaken by a feeling of relief. I had closed that chapter of my life. My phone then rang. David was the one. "Emma, the divorce papers have been delivered to me." His voice was dispassionate as he said, "I'm happy they got to you. Kindly handle the formalities." I answered coolly. He said, "I won't bother you about the baby," after a pause. "I'm not going to contact you again. It was closure, but it was a chilly farewell." I discovered an inner strength I was unaware I possessed when I hung up the phone. I was prepared for what lay ahead. She was a strong, self-reliant lady and a devoted mother, not David's estranged wife. On a calm evening, my 4-year-old son Jacob was playing with his toys on the floor as I sat on the couch reading a magazine. A knock on the door abruptly broke the peace. I went to answer it, perplexed, wondering who it might be at this hour. I could hardly identify the woman standing there, yet there was a familiar sadness in her eyes. "Hello, Emma." "It has been a while." Hesitantly, she said. After a while, I realized she was Linda, a friend I had known via my former spouse. "It has been, indeed. Why have you come here?" She moved uneasily and glanced at Jacob, who was now snooping about my legs. "I wanted you to be aware of David." "David?" Hearing his name for the first time in a long time sent shivers down my back. "How about him?" Trying to speak steadily, I asked. Linda let out a sigh. "Emma, he's not doing well. Following your departure, his situation deteriorated. He started drinking. A few years ago, he got married again and had a kid. However, the boy had difficulties from birth. It was too much for David to bear. He divorced his wife and left them. Additionally, he is currently refusing to pay child support. He's having legal issues." I was shocked by the news, but not in the manner Linda would have thought. I was so depressed. For his child and the lady he had abandoned, not for David. "That's awful," I said quietly. Linda gave a nod. "Given your history with him, I felt you ought to be aware." Although I respected her concern, I was aware that I needed to establish limits. "I appreciate you informing me, Linda, but I'm done with that chapter of my life. David made his own decisions, and neither my kid nor I am affected by them." Linda stared at Jacob, then back at me. "Emma, I get it. I simply believed." I grinned, albeit regretfully. "Thank you, Linda, but right now I'm more concerned about Jacob and our lives. I no longer care what David does or doesn't do." She seemed to comprehend and nodded. "Emma, I hope you and Jacob are content. Both of you are deserving." "Thank you. Yes, we are." I looked at Jacob, who was once again completely absorbed in his toys. And that's how I planned to maintain it. Following Linda's departure, I shut the door and rested against it for a while, inhaling deeply. I was determined to keep the life I had created for myself and my kid intact, even if the past had a way of catching up with you. That day, the sounds of youngsters playing and laughter filled the park. Jacob and I were present. As I watched him run about, pride filled my heart. Then a voice cut through the air, familiar yet unwanted. "Is that you, Emma?" With a sinking heart, I turned. Barbara. My ex-mother-in-law was coming over, staring at Jacob. "Barbara," I said calmly. "Why are you here?" Disregarding my tone. Her eyes were fixed on Jacob. "He's come a long way." "You mean he's your son?" "Yes, this is Jacob," I replied, quietly stepping aside to put myself between her and my son. There was an unsettling desire in Barbara's eyes. I hoped he would show up. He is, after all, my grandchild. Anger washed over me. "You want to see him, but why?" "You are aware of my other grandchild, though." Her expression twisted as she drifted off. "He's not feeling good. He is ill," simply said. "It's not the same. I wish to be involved in the lives of a grandchild who is healthy." Her remarks were like a blow to my head. She spoke with such disdain for her own grandchild. "Barbara." My voice was hard as I said, "You have no business being involved in Jacob's life. Not after all that transpired." "But David was solely responsible for that, Emma," she objected. I gave a head shake. "You backed him up. When I got pregnant with your grandchild, you turned against me. And now, simply because your other grandchild is ill, you talk about him with such hatred. That cannot be forgiven." Barbara's cheeks flushed. "You cannot prevent me from seeing my grandchild," I firmly said. "I can and I will." Someone who judges individuals by their health is not someone Jacob needs in his life. He will not be included in your perverted conception of family. She seemed ready to protest, but I interrupted her. "We're done talking. Barbara, don't come near us. You are not welcome, nor is your presence desired." After taking Jacob's hand, I turned to leave Barbara standing by herself. As we went, her expression was a mixture of shock and rage. Jacob's innocent eyes were full of curiosity as he glanced up at me. "Who was that woman, Mommy?" "Sweetheart, we used to know that person. But she's no longer in our lives," I said softly. I had a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in years as I sat on the porch and watched the sunset paint the sky with warm hues. Inside, Jacob was playing and his laughter reverberated. The rhythm of life has calmed. The storms of the past are now only dim recollections. "Look at what I made, Mom." I was startled out of my reverie by Jacob's words. With a painting in his hands, he ran outside. It was a photo of us both grinning in the brilliant light. I pulled Jacob into an embrace and murmured, "It's beautiful, Jacob." "You're a really talented artist," he grinned proudly. "I'd want to display it on the refrigerator." "Let's do it." Grinning, I followed him inside. I reflected on our progress as we strolled. The burden of the past used to seem oppressive, but now it seems like a far-off echo. After Jacob had gone to sleep later that night, I sat down with a cup of tea and thought about everything. The silence was broken when the phone rang. Despite my hesitation, I chose to respond. "Hi there. Anna, my sister, was the one." "Emma, hello. I simply wanted to say hello. How are things going for you and Jacob?" "Anna, we're doing well. Jacob is maturing quickly," I answered with a smile on my face. "I was informed about your encounter with Barbara. Are you all right?" Her words were laced with anxiety as she inquired. I let out a sigh. "Yes, it caught me off guard, but I'm fine. That serves just as a remembrance of the past. Emma, I know it's difficult, but you've made great progress. You've created a fantastic life for yourself and Jacob, and you're strong." "Encouraging," she remarked. I was moved by what she said. "Regards, Anna. It has great significance." We continued our conversation on trivial topics and daily life. It was consoling. After hanging up, this relationship with my sister served as a reminder of my network of support. I went to the living room and saw Jacob's artwork on the refrigerator. As I looked at it, I saw how much we had both changed. There was space for healing and fresh starts now that the hurt and rage of the past had subsided. I saw Jacob sleep well as I made my way to his room. I leaned down and gave him a gentle forehead kiss. "Until tomorrow, my tiny artist." Back on the porch, I muttered. I stared up at the stars as they appeared in the night sky. The reverberations of the past were diminishing. They're letting go of me. In their place came hope, a mother's, and her son's unwavering love and quiet strength.